I am going to be reading the story of Antonio Nunez. This is taken from Just Mercy, Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy, chapter 8, which is All God's Children, pages 154 through 156, just part of these pages here. So again, Antonio Nunez is the only child in the country that is known to be sentenced to die in prison for his involvement at age 14 in a single incident where no one was injured. All right, here we go. The section of South Central Los Angeles where Antonio Nunez lived was plagued by gang violence. Antonio's mother would force her children to the floor when shooting erupted outside their crowded home, which happened with disturbing regularity. Nearly a dozen of their neighbors were shot and killed after being caught in the crossfire of gun violence. The difficulties outside Antonio's home were compounded by severe domestic abuse inside the home. From the time Antonio was in diapers, he endured abusive beatings by his father, who hit him with his hand, fist, belt, and extension cords, causing bruises and cuts. He also witnessed terrifying conflicts in which his parents would violently assault each other and threaten to kill one another. The violence was so bad that on more than one occasion, Antonio called the police. He began experiencing severe nightmares from which he awoke screaming. Antonio's depressed mother neglected him. When he cried, she just left him alone. The only activity she could recall ever attending for Antonio was his graduation from a drug abuse resistance education program, DARE, right, in elementary school. He was excited to take his picture with the police officer, she would later say. He wanted to be a police officer when he grew up. In September 1999, a month after he turned 13, Antonio Nunez was riding his bicycle near his home when a stranger shot him in his stomach, side, and arm. Antonio collapsed onto the street. His 14-year-old brother, Jose, heard him screaming and ran to his aid. Jose was shot in the head and killed when he responded to his little brother's call for help. Antonio suffered severe internal injuries that hospitalized him for weeks. When Antonio was released from the hospital, his mother sent him to live with relatives in Las Vegas, where he tried to recover from the tragedy of Joe's death. Antonio was relieved to be away from the dangers of South Central Los Angeles. He stayed out of trouble, was helpful and obedient at home, and spent evenings doing his homework with help from his cousin's husband. He put the gangs and violence of South Central behind him and showed remarkable progress. But within a year, California probation authorities ordered him to return to Los Angeles because he was on probation following his adjudication as a ward of the court for a prior offense. So basically they said, yep, because that incident happened in LA, you got to come back to LA. In poor urban neighborhoods across the United States, Black and brown boys routinely have multiple encounters with the police. Even though many of these children have done nothing wrong, they are targeted by police, presumed guilty, and suspected by law enforcement of being dangerous or engaged in criminal activity. The random stops, questioning, and harassment dramatically increase the risk of arrest for petty crimes. Many of these children develop criminal records for behavior that more affluent children engage in with impunity. Forced back to South Central, blocks from where his brother was murdered, Antonio struggled. A court found that living just blocks from where he was shot and his brother was killed, Nunez suffered trauma symptoms, including flashbacks, an urgent need to avoid the area, a heightened awareness of potential threats, and an intensified need to protect himself from real or perceived threats. He got his hands on a gun for self-defense, but was quickly arrested for it and placed in a juvenile camp where supervisors reported that he eagerly participated in and positively responded to the structured environment and guidance from staff members. After returning from the camp, Antonio was invited to a party where two men twice Antonio's age told him that they were planning to fake a kidnapping to get money from a relative who would pay the ransom. They insisted that Antonio join them. 14-year-old Antonio got in the car with the men to pick up the ransom money. The pretend victim sat in the back seat while Juan Perez drove Antonio, and Antonio sat in the passenger seat. Before they arrived at their Orange County destination to retrieve the money, they found themselves being followed and then chased by two Latino men in a gray van. At some point, Perez and the other man gave Antonio a gun and told him to shoot at the van, and a dangerous high-speed shootout unfolded. The men chasing them were undercover police officers, but Antonio didn't know that when he fired. When a marked car joined the pursuit, Antonio dropped the gun just before the car crashed into some trees. No one was injured, but Antonio and Perez were charged with aggravated kidnapping and attempted murder of the police officers. Antonio and his 27-year-old co-defendant were tried together in a joint trial, and both were found guilty. Under California law, a juvenile has to be at least 16 to be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for murder. But there is no minimum age for kidnapping. So the Orange County judge sentenced Antonio to imprisonment until death, asserting that he was a dangerous gang member who could never change or be rehabilitated despite his difficult background and the absence of any significant criminal history. The judge sent him to California's dangerous, overcrowded adult prisons. At 14, Antonio became the youngest person in the United States condemned to die in prison for a crime in which no one was physically injured.